Under the Trump administration, we will continue tirelessly in our work to ensure clean air, land, and water for every American, while simultaneously driving economic growth.
Welcome back. Today is Wednesday, February 18th, 2026, and we are witnessing what can only be described as a controlled demolition of the unaccountable administrative state. In just the last few days, the structures that have allowed unelected bureaucrats to rule by decree for decades have been dealt a terminal blow. We're talking about a massive restoration of constitutional sovereignty that the experts in Washington claimed was legally impossible. Today, we are breaking down three massive stories that prove the era of the unaccountable expert is coming to an end. First, our anchor story. The historic rescission of the greenhouse gas endangerment finding, a move that effectively strips the EPA of its self-appointed power to micromanage every facet of the American economy. Then we'll look at the global energy schism. While the United States is embracing what the administration calls energy sanity, the European Union is currently spiraling into a self-inflicted deindustrialization crisis. It is a real-time experiment in which model actually works for working families. And finally, we'll cover the latest results from DOGE and the border. With encounters down 95% and over $200 billion in bureaucratic waste already slashed, the America First mandate is moving from campaign promises to hard, cold data. The legacy media is calling this disruption. It isn't disruption, it's a realignment. Before we dive deep, if you're new here, I'm John Gray. We are building a community of people who refuse to stand by while the common sense of our country is under attack. We need voices like yours in this fight. So hit that subscribe button and join us as we demand accountability through reason and logic. The lead story today is the capstone of a massive deregulatory initiative that was finalized this past Thursday, February 12th, 2026. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin announced the formal rescission of the 2009 greenhouse gas endangerment finding. Now, if that sounds like legalese, let me explain why it matters to your wallet, your car, and your freedom. For 16 years, this single administrative finding was the legal prerequisite for nearly every federal regulation aimed at carbon dioxide. It was the foundation for EV mandates, power plant restrictions, and the slow strangulation of American heavy industry. The administration is arguing that for too long, federal agencies have been allowed to bypass what Congress actually intended. They've called that 2009 finding a holy grail of federal regulatory overreach. Think about it this way. The Supreme Court ruled back in 2007 that the EPA could regulate these gases, but only if they were found to endanger public health. The current administration argues the Obama-era EPA took that inch and took a mile. They transformed a narrow definition of air pollutants into a tool to overhaul the entire American vehicle fleet without a single new law being passed by your elected representatives in Congress. The legal logic here is fascinating because it relies on the recent shift in the Supreme Court toward textualism. Under the major questions doctrine, the court has made it clear that if an agency wants to make a decision of vast economic and political significance, they need a clear statement from Congress. They can't just reimagine 50-year-old laws to fit a modern political agenda. But here's the part the green energy lobby doesn't want to talk about: the futility argument. The EPA's own modeling now shows that even if the United States completely eliminated every single car and truck from our roads, the impact on global temperatures by the year 2100 would be de minimis. Essentially, it wouldn't matter. American light-duty vehicles only account for about 1.8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The administration is asking a very logical question. Why should we impose a $1.3 trillion regulatory burden on American consumers to address a 1.8% global variable? It's mathematically ineffective. It increases the cost of a new car by an average of $2,400 for a result that is effectively zero on the global stage. This is what they mean by economic sanity. It's prioritizing your choice as a consumer over symbolic gestures that don't actually change the climate, but do make you poorer. This deregulatory push is the 1-2 punch combined with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or the OBBBA, which was signed back on July 4th, 2025. You might remember the fiscal cliff we were facing at the end of last year. The OBBBA made the 2017 tax cuts permanent, providing the stability businesses need to actually invest in America again. But this bill went further than just extending old cuts. It introduced populist conservative reliefs designed for the people watching this video. For example, there is now a tax deduction for qualified overtime income. You can deduct up to $12,500 of that extra half-time pay from your taxable income. It's an incentive to work, not a handout. And for our service workers, the no tax on tips provision allows a deduction of up to $25,000 for those earning less than $150,000 a year. We're also seeing no tax on Social Security and additional deductions for seniors age 65 and over, up to $6,000 individually. This is direct relief for those of you who were hit the hardest by the inflation we saw between 2021 and 2024. Now, I know the critics are pointing at the price tag. The Congressional Budget Office, or CBO, says this bill will cost $3.4 trillion over a decade. They're projecting deficits exceeding $3 trillion by 2030, but the administration is pointing at the scoreboard. In the third quarter of 2025, GDP growth hit 4.4%. That is more than double what the CBO experts predicted. The argument is dynamic scoring, that growth and investment will yield higher revenues than these static models can ever account for. It's a bold bet on the American worker, and a total rejection of the managed decline we've been told is inevitable. For the first time in years, the government is getting out of the way of your prosperity. But to see where that managed decline leads when you don't get the government out of the way, we only have to look across the Atlantic. While the US is moving toward what the president calls energy sanity, the European Union is currently a cautionary tale for the rest of the world. On January 1st of this year, 2026, the EU launched its Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. In plain English, they are taxing imports based on carbon performance, effectively trying to export their high energy prices to the rest of the world. The result? European business leaders are calling it a structural competitiveness risk. Look at the numbers. Industrial electricity prices in the EU are about 158% higher than they are here in the United States. While our GDP is growing at over 4%, EU manufacturing output actually dropped by nearly 6% in the year ending November 2025. In Germany, which used to be the engine of the European economy, they focused so much on their energy transition and phasing out nuclear power that they now have the highest household electricity prices in the EU. They are paying about 38 cents per kilowatt hour. We are seeing a wave of deindustrialization over there. Giant companies like BASF and ArcelorMittal are literally packing up and moving production to the US and Asia because they can't afford to keep the lights on in Europe. The Belgian Prime Minister actually warned just last month that the decarbonization of Europe will be a synonym for the deindustrialization of Europe. The United States has taken a different path by prioritizing coal and gas and repealing what the administration calls the Green New Scam mandates. We are positioning ourselves as the global leader in affordable energy. The administration's logic is simple. Economic strength is the prerequisite for any environmental progress. You can't save the planet if you can't afford to feed your family. By reducing our reliance on foreign supply chains for EV minerals and green tech, we aren't just lowering costs, we're strengthening national security. It's a stark contrast. One side of the Atlantic is choosing regulation first, which leads to contraction. The other is choosing energy first, which leads to growth. You remember the energy crisis of the 70s, the lines, the rationing. Europe is choosing to go back there. America is choosing to move forward. But that movement forward isn't just about energy. It's about the very structure of the government itself and who actually runs the country. To make these policy shifts permanent, the administration has had to tackle the bureaucratic inertia that stalled reforms in the past. That's where the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, comes in. Led by Elon Musk and Peter Thiel affiliated appointees, DOGE has already claimed $215 billion in savings as of early this year. They are using a chainsaw approach to the bureaucracy. They've canceled billions in contracts, including $4 billion from the Department of Defense and $3 billion from HHS related to old COVID testing. And they are closing vacant federal offices in cities like Atlanta and DC. But the real shift is in the workforce. By restoring Schedule F, the president can now reclassify thousands of career civil servants as political appointees. This makes it possible to fire them for poor performance or ideological alignment. They've even started a DEI purge to remove anyone deemed DEI adjacent from federal agencies. While DOGE cleans up the inside of the government, the DHS is finally cleaning up the border. Secretary Kristi Noem reported in January that we have achieved the most secure border ever. Look at these metrics for 2025. For the first time in 50 years, we saw negative net migration, meaning more people left the country than entered illegally. Since May of last year, the Border Patrol has released 0 illegal aliens into the country. Catch and release is officially dead. The average monthly apprehensions are now under 9,000. That is a 95% decrease compared to the Biden administration. They've removed 2.6 million people through a combination of deportations and self-deportations driven by the crackdown on illegal labor and benefits. The administration's argument is that incentives work. If you remove the promise of a work permit and a free release, the flow stops. And because the flow has stopped, they've been able to focus on removing over 400,000 criminal illegal aliens who are already here. When you look at these 3 stories together, the death of the administrative state, the energy boom, and the restoration of the border, a very clear through line emerges. It is a mandate for sovereignty. By stripping the EPA of its overreach and passing the OBBBA, the power of policymaking is returning to the legislative branch and to you, the people. We are seeing immediate prosperity with 4.4% growth and inflation sitting at 2.4% as of last month. Is it all smooth sailing? Of course not. We are still looking at a $35 trillion national debt and projections of $3 trillion deficits. The aggressive use of executive orders is being litigated in the Supreme Court as we speak. And our withdrawal from international climate agreements has left us isolated from the rest of the G7. But for the first time in a long time, the federal government is acting like it actually works for the American citizen. They are dismantling decades of bureaucratic accumulation in a single year. So what do you think? Is the Trump economy finally delivering the results you were promised? Or are the long-term debt concerns something we can't afford to ignore? I'm John Gray. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.